Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, SCORE Success Stories, sponsored by the SCORE Hudson Valley and chapter and New York, Greater New York chapters. That includes Dutchess, Long Island, Orange, Putnam, Queens, Rockland, Staten Island, Ulster, and Westchester. Next slide, please. About SCORE. Our goal is to foster vibrant small businesses through free mentoring and education. We serve our small business communities by providing confidential business mentoring, webinars and workshops, extensive online educational resources. We support anyone from startups to established businesses, volunteer business mentors with a wide-ranging industry experiences and areas of expertise to draw on, and a total of 10,000 volunteers on a national basis. Next slide. And this is our contact information for each of the respective chapters. Again, you'll get a copy of these slides, so we don't need to write all this down. So you'll get a copy of the recording and the slides after the presentation within the next 24 hours. Next slide, please. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Everyone will be muted during the presentation. Please submit any questions through the Q&A bar. The chat has been disabled. We'll answer as many questions as possible after the presentation. And as I just mentioned, you'll be provided a copy of the slides and the recording within 24 hours after the presentation. Next slide. Today's webinar. This webinar will feature two companies that have worked with a SCORE mentor to enhance their business. First is Community Allies, LLC. Helps businesses, schools, governments, and nonprofits come together to build and sustain diverse, inclusive, equitable, change-making teams who learn how to do their part to advance community-centered development that replenishes sustainable resources. And second, Nothing But Time Sailing Charters, LLC, is a luxury 2.5-hour sailing charter in the Hudson River Valley that sailed out of the Poughkeepsie waterfront. They offer complimentary charcuterie boards and selected beverages up to 6 exclusive passengers. The takeaways: learn about these two unique businesses, learn how these business owners work with a SCORE mentor to enhance their business, and learn lessons from these entrepreneurs that could benefit your business. Next slide. Our presenters today are Sarah Hobson, PhD, is the founder and president of the Community Allies, LLC. She supports educators, corporations, nonprofits, and governments in doing their part to advance regional, national, and international equity. And Captain Dan Gramanis is the owner-operator of Nothing But Time Sailing Charters, LLC. He possesses a 25 gross ton master captain license with sailing endorsements issued by the United States Coast Guard. He has over 35 years sailing experience. Without any further ado, I will turn this over initially to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here, and I've been so grateful to SCORE and to Rose Rubin, who's been my mentor, for all of the help that they have provided. I wouldn't be where I am without SCORE, so I highly recommend working with SCORE. I am a business owner. I hail from St. Louis, and I've spent time in upstate New York as well as an assistant professor. And I started my company back in about 2015. Shortly after the death of Michael Brown in St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis, and as I was growing up in St. Louis, we had a lot of racial reconciliation that just wasn't happening. And I was always listening for where those conversations were going to happen and when they were going to happen. And I was wondering why our region didn't talk about our blatant racism and the blatant segregation of our races and of our resources. And I always wanted to see and hear that young people would have access to the sustainable resources that they needed. I lived about 5 minutes away away from the city, from downtown St. Louis. It's slightly different from how things look in New York, but I sensed that there were resources that were not making it to the young people of St. Louis, in North St. Louis in particular. And I wanted to see the companies and the region come together to do their part to bring those sustainable resources to the children of North St. Louis, especially because I knew I had the best resources just 5-10 minutes away from where the kids were growing up that I knew were in communities that were struggling. So the mission of Community Allies has been long a calling, right? That started when I was very young, when I moved actually from New York to St. Louis as a child, started to see these racial divides and started to have a question about what could I do? My burning question was, what could I do to help bridge these gaps and to help bring people together and to help advance racial reconciliation? And I stumbled upon a process called ethnodrama that was actually birthed even as I was a student in St. Louis schools. And as a student, I encountered teachers who were very impactful. And I started to think if I could go into the field of education, I might be able to help young people share their stories. And if they could share their stories, that would move the hearts and minds of people across the St. Louis region to come together and to do their part. And to think about how they could help replenish sustainable resources. And fast forward years later, I discovered ethnodrama and I started to do youth programs, and that was my dissertation research. And what youth did was they went out into communities and they collected stories related to issues that they cared about, that they wanted to see change. And they learned from companies and they learned from nonprofits and they learned from their families and they learned from their teachers what was going on. And then they took those stories, they compiled them, and they used their storytelling in the form of documentaries or in the form of art and drama, and they would take their productions back to their audiences, facilitate conversations, and talk with everybody about how they were already advancing change and where we could work better together to advance change. So that became Honoring Stories and Integrating Curriculum. And I have taught teachers in this methodology as a professor, and I have worked with companies and schools, and I help build diverse talent pipelines. But the name of the game is that we are all learning how to do our part as businesses, as schools, as governments, as nonprofits, how to do our part to build and sustain change-making teams within our organizations who know how to work together really well, who know how to do their part wherever they are in their operations and their productions and their curriculum design, to be a part of making change with communities, to be implementing real-world instruction, to be implementing real-world products that solve real problems for communities that most need those problems solved, and that help advance community-centered development that is oftentimes, development practices displace people from their homes. And that's a pattern that I see in St. Louis. It's a pattern I've seen in New York. It's a pattern I've seen everywhere that I've worked, that there are too many communities that are at risk of being displaced. And so they don't have stable housing. They don't have stable resources that come with housing that help them get a foothold, both in employment and in other areas of society. And so I work with companies and I work with schools and I work with nonprofits to help them think about how can they implement in their own internal operations better economic engines for their companies, but also better economic engines with communities that help build the ecosystem and the pipeline of jobs and job training and communication, and making sure that products and resources are flowing through our governments well and reaching the people who need them, and that we are, in every region that we're a part of, are really working to come together well to support and advance community-centered solutions and community-centered development. So that's the work of Community Allies. The way that we operate is, if you imagine a penny that you drop into the water that ricochets out and has concentric circles that just keep spreading and just keep spreading, that is how the change-making process works. So I work with it can be a department or it can be a cross-department team, but I work with a team of early adopters, and they come through what is an agile, collaborative process that works over time in an agile way and helps teams think strategically together and build bridges to each other through their stories, through their understandings of their communities and build bridges to other organizations that are in their sectors. So if they're a company, they would work with nonprofits or schools. If they're a school or nonprofit, they'd work with corporations, but we're working together to build bridges to engage in some change-making work that does advance the voices of people in the communities that the organizations are seeking to serve, and that helps advance the political processes, the communication processes, the economic infrastructure, that helps just really build the kind of infrastructure and build into an infrastructure and expand and improve upon it, so that everything in local regions and areas can flow, and so that the resources and products and services can get to the people who need them most, and so everybody can learn how to come together to advance the voices of people who've been the most silenced and the most marginalized. So those change-making teams and companies come together, and they form cohorts, and they become leaders, and they take the training, the leadership team training, back to their teams, and then they engage in a product development. So whatever products the company is working to bring to communities, or curricula that the schools are designing to impact the students, and they think together as a reflective, collaborative research team about how to bring those products, those services to market in a way that advances the voices of people in the community that most need access to those products and services, and most need access to having a say in their community and to having leadership and decision-making opportunities. And so we marry up teams that are inside companies and schools and nonprofits, governments, and with others in their sector to make that change. And then over time, that team goes through about a year-long process where they learn how to bring a product or a service to market together. And then more and more of the operations and more of the production and more of the marketing and the sales comes together within that company around that product and around that agile process. And they become more and more innovative, more and more efficient, more and more collaborative, and they breed into the DNA of the company over time, the change that's needed. I often also work with the executive suite and with those who are at the top of the company to bring frameworks and to consult them on how to start to build out the programming in communities. I help and support build those community partnerships as well. And so generally speaking, what happens is that from the top down, from the bottom up, and from the sides in, the change making begins, and the honoring stories and integrating curriculum, agile methodology becomes a part of the DNA of companies and of the way that companies work and move and breathe in the world. So when you take on this process, what happens is that your organizational cultures become more people-centered. They become, your communication flows better, your relationship building flows better. People experience healing that they've been craving. They experience new understandings of themselves, their stories, what they bring, and how that contributes to the company and to the community. Leaders and employees develop systems that help everybody grow in their own talent. They maximize their own talent, but they do that as a part of teams where they're maximizing everybody else's talent as well. Leaders, employees, and communities start to invest in companies in a long-term, like, wow, this company, this school, this nonprofit is really doing great work. I want to stay parked here. It's functional, it's healthy, and I can flow and I can grow. So there's deep satisfaction that employees experience, and the brand of the company builds into the community. The community has more ownership of the company and its products and services because they're shaping the products and services as well. And the teams just are, way more coherent, experience a lot more satisfaction, and become more innovative. So all different kinds of products and services become a reality and a possibility when all of the communication and all the relationship building is flowing. So here's just an example of an internal company change-making process for one medium-sized company. You can kind of read through some of these outcomes, but basically, we fed honoring stories into every nook and cranny of this company, and the change-making early adopters have turned into multiple teams of people who have come together to join in the training, to take the leadership training back to their departments, to their teams, to grow the collaboration that's happening on those teams. And it's feeding up to all the different layers of executives above the teams that have been a part of the change making. It's feeding down to those who are in the operations and on the production side and sales and marketing side. side, and the whole entire culture of the company is steadily shifting over time. And so many of the barriers that that were in place, because it was a predominantly white company, they have now been learning how to have difficult conversations, how to build bridges to each other, how to engage in true healing and transformation, both for individuals and teams, in a way that they are seeing the part and the role that they play in communities, and they're reaching farther and farther and deeper into communities to make an impact. So here's some of the impact that's coming just from this one medium-sized company. They are working with governments, they're working with nonprofits, they're working with schools, they're helping build everybody's capacity to strengthen diverse talent pipelines. They're helping build everybody's capacity to stay profitable, to stay sustainable, and to stay more integrated with the community and more in step with what the community really wants and really needs. And better and more diverse talent pipelines are emerging, and the company is able to retain its talent and to attract talent that wants to be a part of a company that's making change like this. So it's been super exciting. And here's just some testimonials of people who just are, celebrating that in very challenging markets, they've been able to stay afloat as professionals and as sales professionals, and that they have just seen a tremendous amount of change within their company and in communities. And it's just been liberating for them to be able to make the kind of impact that they're making in communities. And then just the quality of the programming and the collaborative collective action that comes with that programming. So stepping back, how did I get here? Right? This PowerPoint even just took a long time, right? Just to land in this place. So I started with SCORE back when I was in upstate New York, and Rose stepped in at a moment where I was going, I think I want to, go back to St. Louis and make sure that I'm making an impact there, but also continue to make an impact where I am here on the East Coast. And so I started to talk with Rose, and I really, as you can see, this is a complex process. It's a long-term process. I'm not just coming into a company with like a workshop, right? I'm coming in with a whole process, and I have to think about, how do I get their buy-in? How do I help them understand the long-term process that they're engaging in? And how do I help them stay the course and want to inspire them so much to be a part of the change that they can enter into these waters and stay the course? Because this is work that is messy. This is work that is all about relationship building. This is about healing. People take 2 steps forward in their healing, 1 step back, right? People don't just heal instantly. That's the agile process that helps us get to that place where we go, oh, that's what we could be doing, right? And with companies, sometimes it's, you start to move in the direction of really having some good DEI programs and making some good progress, but then over here, you don't have those programs. And so then this part of the company works against this part of the company, right? So there's all different layers of obstacles that come with this work. And I've just really had to think through, how do I bring this to companies in meaningful ways? And Rose was tremendously helpful for me, both in thinking about how to market this, how to talk about this, how to package it. She brought many different examples of, because I bring a comprehensive program of ways that I could package that program so that companies could understand that they're engaging with a program and a process that works, but they'll still make it their own. But there's room for them to make it their own, but there's still a base program that they're building from. And other times I'm bringing the process, and companies are building their programs. And so how does that work? And so she just kind of gave me lots of different examples of how to package what I'm doing and how to put that into contracts and how to set up relationships with companies so that they would understand what it is, and that I would understand what they need and what they're looking for, and that we could build bridges to each other and start the process. So she was tremendously helpful on that front and has continued to be tremendously helpful. And I would say that those were some of the biggest conversations that we had. Happy to answer any questions about that. And then ongoing challenges, as a business owner, this is a huge process. I really get to know communities. I'm working with communities up and down the East Coast, Midwest. And so oftentimes I have to really spend time learning communities and do my ethnography, both on the company and corporate front and on the community front. So there's a lot of time that goes into the community building. And so just figuring out, how to allocate my time as a business owner is always one of those challenges. And my advice to new business owners is, get as much help as you can from people, for sure, but keep your compass, keep your true north. I think that's a good segue to Dan here. Right? Just know where you're going and take in people's advice, but stay true to yourself, and you know your business better than anybody. And so as you're educating others and mentors on what you do and how to help you, you have to build that bridge to them to help them help you, right? But you also want to make sure that you remember that you know the most about your business. And so you have to trust your gut and really listen for what you're trying to bring into the world and how it's best to bring that into the world. So I think that's the best summary of all my notes here. Dan, I will turn it over to you guys. Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much to that awesome explanation of your company. And just so you're aware, your mentor, Rose Rubin, has been sending messages cheering you on throughout your presentation. And Dan, just to make you aware, Lloyd is also on the line, getting ready to cheer you on as well. To all our viewers, Dan is giving us a live shot from his vessel sitting on the Hudson River there. So that's a live, beautiful background there of our weather today. Without any further ado, I'll turn that over to Dan.
Hey everybody, welcome to my office today.
Huh.
I'm Captain Dan, owner, operator of the Nothing But Time sailing charters here in the Poughkeepsie waterfront. We sail out of here Wednesday through Sunday. A little bit about me. This is my inspiration. This is my hobby. I turned my hobby into a business. So it gets me out on the water. I make some money. I meet beautiful people. It's a really great gig to have. It's the best damn job I ever had in my life. But anyway, I started back like 35 years ago, sailing in Florida, New York. New York originally from Lake George up at the J24 boats in the Adirondacks on Wednesday nights. Moved to Florida, sailed all on the East Coast, Bahamas, came back to New York, and can't take the sailor out of me, so I just keep on sailing. But I thought it'd be an interesting niche for a sailboat charter here in the Poughkeepsie waterfront. I want to show the residents of the Hudson Valley and further out what the Hudson Valley is all about on the river. A lot of people are landlubbers. They never had the opportunity to get on the water, and I make that happen with the sailboat charter. So, I kind of consider myself a servant of the sea, resources of the Hudson, not to pollute it. So I'm a servant of the sea. I give them a nice little narrated tour about all the sites we travel on the Hudson River here. A lot of history here, lots of history. So with that being said, my business, we do 2.5-hour charters. I have a nice luxury sailboat here. It's a 2011 Hunter. It's only a couple years old. It's very comfortable. So, I had to turn my hobby into a passion, and this was a great way to turn my hobby into a passion. And I'm a full-time physical therapist. So this is really my side job, or my side hobby, my side hustle. I can't make a career out of this, I don't think, because it's only a 6-month season here in New York. But I suppose if I went away elsewhere, I could. I'm currently working on my 100-ton gross license for my Coast Guard, which I just need to submit the paperwork. So I'm growing my licensure by sailing, and that allows me to get a bigger boat and allows me to get more passengers, allows me to grow my business if I needed to. But honestly, I think my business, I think I'm okay with the size of my business. It's just me. My girlfriend is my first mate. So it's just me and her. We start, like I said, Wednesday, 5 to 7:30 happy hours, and we do 2.5-hour charters. So I needed to figure out a business plan, how to make this work. And another friend of mine mentioned the SCORE mentorship program. I immediately contacted them, and I was gracefully introduced to Mr. Lloyd Rubin, Rose Rubin's husband, and he sent me in the right direction. He gave me the path to follow, the startup roadmap that I needed, the business plan. He gave me challenges, how to, made me think, critical thinking on, demographics, who I want to market, how you want to present yourself, He's made me set short-term goals, long-term goals. I started business back in 2020 when COVID was coming, so that was a big challenge. I thought it was a big challenge, but it actually worked out in my favor because a lot of families needed to get away by themselves, and we did a party of 6, so it was always a family that came or close friends, so they felt safe. We went through that. We worked through it. Had a great season. I've been having each year. My business has been growing, which is a blessing. I'm doing a lot of marketing myself. I do. You got to be a man of many hats. Lloyd has given me that faith that I can do that and the knowledge to do how. He gave me a lot of business resources. For example, I needed an accountant, so he referred me to another accountant that's in Ulster County, Mr. Dan Gagnon, out of Kingston. I think he's retired now, but he gave me, I need to do the LLC thing and things like that with taxes. It's all important when you open a business. You have to learn about all that stuff. He definitely gave me the support I needed to thrive in a small business. Without him, I don't know what the outcome would have been. I don't think it would have been as successful as if I did not have a business plan, know my demographics, know who I wanted to market, put my price points, know my clientele. My charters, my charters are luxury. I call them luxury. We serve fine charcuterie boards. We serve fine wine. On our Sunset Champagne charter, we have a nice bottle of champagne that's complimentary to Vavi Chalik. So we sail sometimes, but sometimes we can't because of the weather, motor. But either way, it's up to the guests, and the guests, absolutely every guest on this boat had 100%, 110% great time. Referrals that have been out the wazoo. They come. I have recurrent clients come. Texas, a lot of people from Texas. It's too hot there. So I think this is just a little niche. If you want to get in your niche, if you want to get a niche, you got to find your niche and go with it. As far as like my next level of dreaming, what I want to do, I think I stated that earlier. I want to get a bigger captain's license, which I'm doing. Yeah, we're only 5 years into it. I think the score is giving me the catalyst to grow and how to do those. Lloyd is instrumental, and he wants me to merchandise things. So I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I got some shirts. We've been merchandising shirts. I got the rack cards made up. We do a lot of advertisements in the local restaurants. Shadows is my biggest clientele. I like it's a 4 to 5 star restaurant. So my demographics is, the clientele that can, come out and spend $800 on a 2.5 hour boat ride. So prices aren't cheap, but you pay what you get for. I suppose. Price point is where it needs to be. I'm not losing business because it's too expensive. I think it's a great deal. I'd like to work on a mega yacht one day. It's like down below deck, but we'll work on that when I get retired. Like I said, I'm still working full time. I don't know if I have any questions for me. I can accept them at the end. But I think if you guys are really want to go to the score, you really can get a mentor and get started and let them help you build the roadmap and give you the resources that you need, because you don't know. You never did it. And I think I'm the smallest business that can be, a 1-person deal. I did my LLC, and it's been really good to me. It's been really good to me. Without the score, I don't think like I said, I would have been where I am today, and as successful as I am today. They told me how to get a nice image and all that stuff. So I don't know what else to mention. But I think it's a great organization.
Thank you, Dan. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for sharing about your business, and especially how Lloyd helped you get started. And I think there was just a slide there that had a picture of both Lloyd and Rose. There they are.
Yep. Lovely time on a.
So they took you up on taking a ride, huh? Good.
They finally did. I got on them for many years. Say, when you coming on the boat, Lloyd and Rose? They finally made it. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Very good. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very
I have a few questions for you. This one's for Sarah in particular. Sarah, can you speak about some unique challenges when working with schools in comparison to companies or governments?
Sure. Let's see how to answer that. I think the biggest challenge with schools is they tend not to have a budget. So you have to be very imaginative about, so I really feel more like a nonprofit when I work with schools, because sometimes I have to raise the money. Sometimes I have to do grant writing. And so a lot of my business model has been to start to think in terms of how to get resources flowing from companies to schools with my programming. So that's where I'm headed next, is working out those logistics. Did you say governments, challenges of working with governments?
Yeah, well, it's mostly particularly schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's always, there's always an onboarding process with any organization. So schools and companies, similarly, you have to get multiple layers of buy-in, right? So you have to be connected up with the decision makers in each organization, and the people sometimes who are most interested have to get the program, then they have to be the gatekeepers and the advocates to get the program to the people above them. And so there's multiple layers of buy-in that, for me, to really help to have that change take root, there's a lot of relationship building that goes into any organization.
Okay, again, one person again, thanking you both for sharing your stories. I think this one's for Dan. This individual also lives in Poughkeepsie. The question is, do you like your job when it gets cold? I'm assuming it must be a little chilly on the waterfront.
Well, I've always been told there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad weather gear. So no, I love my job, whether cold or warm. As a Marine, we love any kind of weather. So it's just instilled with me. You just have to have the proper weather gear. So we're out of the water October 1. So it doesn't get too cold. We're done for the season next week, starting back up in May 1. So yeah,
Okay.
but thanks. Question.
Okay, Rose also shared that Dan Gagnon was also a member of, also a mentor for you, Captain Dan,
Absolutely.
along with Lloyd. And she also mentions that she and Lloyd had a great time on your boat.
Yeah. Well, I think I have the great time as well as every guest. It's just a blessing to me because I get as much joy as my guests do, and I think they see that. So I think the vibes are all good on my boat. It's just where everybody wants to be. Who doesn't like a sailboat? Come on.
Dan, another question for you. Do you have any competition? How do you deal with it?
Right. The competition around here would be up in Kingston. As far as the size of the boat, they also have a sailboat that has been well established. But that's in Kingston. Poughkeepsie Waterfront has no sailboat here. The Newburgh Waterfront has a big 300 passenger tub, I call it, which is no competition for my small 6 passenger luxury sailboat. So I don't know if there's any competition. I just do my own thing, and it's been successful. I try not to compete with anybody. But yeah.
Well, you've identified a niche and you're sticking to it. That's what it sounds like, and it's been worthwhile for you.
It's been a lovely ride, and I think I'm going to do it year after year after year.
Okay. Sarah, what is next for your business?
Well, there's a lot that's happening. There's basically there's the work that I'm doing that is taking hold on the East Coast, continuing to shepherd that work and to continue to take it to new dimensions in the community. And then there's work that I'm doing in St. Louis, and I am building relationships with the construction industry here and learning the ins and outs of the construction industry and working with several organizations in the construction industry. So kind of building out the core team of change makers in the St. Louis area who are going to help diversify the construction industry and break down some of the barriers for small minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses in St. Louis. There's a lot of barriers to them gaining equity in the St. Louis market. And so we're tackling that problem. And I'm working together with other general contractors and small minority and women-owned businesses to tackle that problem and to build collaborative mentorship and opportunities for people to work together, companies to work together, and to build a better ecosystem that has stronger internship programs and workforce development programs and stronger onboarding into companies, but then stronger cultures within the general contractors for retaining talent. So that's all in the works.
Great, thank you. Dan, same question. What is next for your business?
Yeah. Well, I see a tiki bar pontoon coming up to the area, maybe. Yeah, we're gonna maybe get a tiki pontoon, put 12 passengers on there with my bigger captain's license here in the future, and maybe hire somebody else to do my work. But I don't know. I still love chartering a boat. Still gets me out on there, and I just love the water. So there's not
Playing it
much.
by ear. Playing
I
it by
think-
ear, I take it.
I'm playing it by ear, just taking every day as a blessing and being healthy and doing the best I can with what I got here. So
Great. And Sarah, I believe this one's definitely for you. Wondering about proposal. Is it a good idea to send out proposals or not? Often when I speak to potential clients, they show strong interest, and once they ask for proposals, I send proposals, they go silent.
I wonder if there's any more insight into that question that you might want to provide, but in my experience,
That's all there is.
yeah. Okay. Yes, you do need a strong proposal, and I tend to be, as an academic, wordy. And so I have really learned how to, like, I'll start with a 32-page proposal for a job, for an organization where I really learn them, but I'll take time to really learn them and what they're doing and what they need. And then I'll get it down to about a 2-page. So when I started doing proposals, I had a lot of content I was trying to fit in. And then I basically was able to, even from the get-go, take that 32 pages and think about what are the really significant aspects, elements of change that I'm bringing, and how can I explain my process very succinctly. And so I've gotten that down to a 2-page, sometimes a 1.5-page proposal. So it's really easy for the decision makers to read, to understand, to absorb, and to know what their return on investment is going to be. And so I don't know, what may be breaking down with proposals, but by the time I send a proposal, I have a relationship. I definitely have built a relationship. I have been told, yes, we're going forward with this, or yes, we're interested in this. People don't always accept my proposals, but they generally will tell me, yes or no. And yeah, a good, strong proposal it is important to have that skill set.
But I think you just made an important point, is even though they may go silent, is to really follow up to try to gain a better understanding of what they may not like about it, whether it's price or whatever the case may be. Don't let it just go silent. Follow up and get some input, and so you can fine tune the next proposal.
Right, totally.
And I think this one might be for you as well, Sarah. Can you talk about the 2 kids that made a difference in the community? Remember those trees that were so important for them?
Yeah, that's a good story, Rose. Thanks for remembering that.
Yeah, you know where that came from.
Yeah, I do. So, as you can imagine, when I'm doing youth programs, I take on some pretty hot topics in communities. And one of the hot topics was the relocation of a major government agency from one part of St. Louis to another part of St. Louis. And in that process, the young people that I work with, their neighbors were being displaced. And it was the 10th generation of displacement. So it was very devastating to the community, and the community doesn't really feel that they have voice. This is North St. Louis, and there's a lot of struggles. And so anyway, here I am working with 10 students who were absolutely precious from public housing, and we were, I was taking them out and helping them learn city planning and helping them interview people at smart growth conferences, and, you know, just helping them build bridges to adults. And we were at a conference working with some other adults, and we were doing a little brainstorm. And there's this area that you might know about called Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis. It's where there was a public housing infrastructure that was built in the 50s. It ultimately was demolished about 20 years later because the local housing authority didn't keep it up, and it became so run down, and the people the police didn't come. There's horrible stories, you know, governments, the military dumped chemicals on the children of this, of Pruitt-Igoe, you know, just horrific stories of racism that happened. And so the land is contaminated, and the area where the housing has caved in, the soil is a brown field, and there's no longer any infrastructures, but there's blocks and, you know, some trash and things like that were left from the debris. But there's also woods that have bloomed. And so, but the woods are not terribly pretty. They're, you know, sparse kind of trees here and there, but there are owls that come and land in those trees. And there are sometimes coyotes or foxes that end up in those trees. And so while we were at the conference, the kids that I was working with, we were talking about, you know, what would they like to see change in their community? And they said, we're worried about Pruitt-Igoe. We don't want them to take our forest. And I just, everything in me just stopped, and I thought, they're calling that a forest? But for them, those were the only trees, really. I mean, there are some trees, but not a lot. And they live in a very industrial city zone. And they said, if they take the forest, where will the owls go? And where will the animals go? And it just, you know, it just was one of those moments where you just have to sit down and you just get teary-eyed, because you realize that your world and your reality is so far removed from the children who are growing up in, you know, we were processing gun laws in Missouri that have wreaked havoc on North St. Louis. Those were the context of the conversations we were having. And in the midst of this conversation about how they've seen the violence on their own communities over time, and how it has increased over time as the gun laws have become more lax, that was the conversation we were having. And then it was like, well, what other issues do you want to take up? And it was like, don't take our forest. You know, it's powerful work. And the students, these are teenagers. The students are absolutely powerful communicators and powerful heart-centered people who are really just waiting for people to join them and to work with them to care for their community.
And one last question, Sarah, how important are references when approaching new opportunities?
I think references are important. I think they're always important. I think referrals in the sense of testimonials are really helpful. And I think that, you know, you want to create fans as you go along. You want people who will celebrate the work that you do, who will own it, and who will carry it forward and carry you forward to the next set of opportunities to make an impact and to make a difference. So I would say, yes, they're very important. And I would also say that there are times when doors just open, and that people didn't know me per se, although I would always say it's usually somebody who has some sense of me, who knows me somehow. And they may not know my work exactly, but they know me. And so that makes a big difference.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Again, thank you again to both you, Sarah, and Captain Dan. I want to thank everybody else for joining this afternoon, and we appreciate your attending. Next slide, please. Again, our next webinar is Creative Financing Solutions, legal ones, just to emphasize that. And that's scheduled for Wednesday, October 18th at 1 o'clock. We hope you'll all be joining us at that point in time. And again, next slide. Thank you again to Dan and to Sarah for joining and sharing your businesses, and as well as how SCORE helped you to establish and get your businesses up and running. So again, thank you very much for your insights, and thank you again, everybody else, for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Rose. Thank you for everything. Great to